Welcome back to the fundamentals of live production. In this lesson, we're going to talk about tripods. Tripods are an essential piece of kit that are often overlooked in their importance and functionality on a crew. You don't want to be fighting your gear during a shoot, and a good tripod can help you make excellent footage. So a tripod consists of three basic parts. We've got the head, the connection in between the legs and the head, and the legs themselves. So you can have a ball head like this. A ball head is just designed for photography. It's not designed for live video production. You can have a friction-based head, or you can have a larger cinema fluid-based head. The connection between the leg and the tripod, you can have a telescoping column, which is not recommended, again, for live video production. This is generally, the problem with a telescoping joint is that the point of support stops right here, and anything above that can insert vibrations. The perfect tripod will be absolutely steady. We're trying to create a solid platform for a camera. And we can't do that if the tripod shakes or transmit vibration. If this part of the tripod isn't supported, this part of the tripod is going to introduce vibrations into your shot. So generally, we want to avoid a center telescoping column. So our other options after that are a flat base head, which essentially needs to just meet right at the top of the tripod here, and the leveling action will happen on the legs themselves. So if you're not quite level, we're just going to extend a leg until it is level. On a larger production, the camera can actually weigh so much that leveling the legs becomes impractical. Instead, a much easier method is the ball-based leveling system. This is a 75mm ball. This is a 100mm ball. But both of them have the same idea. There's a screw on the bottom, and no matter what the length of the legs are, as long as it's close, the head can be leveled into position. There's usually a bubble on the back of the tripod, somewhere on it. There's a bubble right here on this one. There's a bubble that allows you to look at it and level the shot. So that's how the ball system works. Looking at the legs are comprised of stages. So this tripod is a 3-stage leg. This is a 3-stage leg. And this one actually has 1, 2, 3, 4 stages of legs. Essentially, the longer a leg gets, the less supported it is. So if you have a choice of making your tripod shorter or longer, it'll be more stable if it's shorter, which is oftentimes where cameras are in tripod systems are set up on staging, so that the tripod is nice and short, and it's a stable platform for the camera. As far as materials of tripods, this one's made out of aluminum. This one's made out of carbon fiber. And these two models are really, really similar that way. They're both 3-stage tripod systems with a mid-level spreader. And the mid-level spreader just keeps the legs from spreading out. But the material of the tripod itself doesn't really matter that much. Carbon fiber is stiffer and lighter, and aluminum is a little less stiff and a little heavier. The extra weight makes it more stable. The extra stiffness in the carbon fiber makes it a little more stable. The two of them together, in most cases, kind of equalize themselves out. So if you're looking at a new tripod purchase or a new setup, I wouldn't blow the money necessarily on carbon fiber. I'm not against it. Carbon fiber's awesome. But if you need to, aluminum's just fine. Now let's look at the head again. Let's go back to the camera head and look at the parts here. So a basic tripod head, this is a friction-based head, has just a couple axes to it. So we don't want to use these ball heads because instead of panning and tilting, this one will roll as well. And we want to keep, it's going to look really weird if your shot can roll as you're zooming in or using it. So this kind of head is okay if you're doing a locked off shot. Like one of our cameras here at Calvary is always locked off. Our camera 8 is just there. But any sort of motion that's going to happen needs to have a locked off roll axis. So we're going to have panning and we're going to have tilting. And on this head in particular, it's just a screw going through the head. So if I screw it down more, I get more friction. If I unscrew it, if I actually unscrew it enough, it becomes wobbly. So this is just an old but reliable tripod, and you can make good moves on this thing. But you've got your pan axis and your tilt axis, and then friction-based locks. On these setups over here, we have a little more advanced setup. There's still a friction-based lock for both pan and for tilt. But we have a fluid-based drag system. So this knob here controls the amount of drag on the pan axis, and I'm going to turn it all the way down. And you can see, even with just a really light touch, it doesn't require much motion at all. And same thing on the tilt axis. So I can make that really light, or I can turn it up and require a lot more motion. But it's not grabbing. It's just a consistent amount of pressure throughout the entire range. Finally, let's look at the big rig over here. This is a Sigma 120 to 300 2.8. It's a beautiful lens. It's a great cinema style lens to be shooting with. And it's really heavy. It's a big, big lens. So on this sort of system, we need to make sure that it's being properly supported. So we've got the rods here to support the lens, make sure we're not putting too much weight on the mount of the lens itself. And these two tripods have counterbalance built into them. Let me show you what I mean by counterbalance. So going back to our basic head, we have our center of gravity more or less over the tripod head, but we don't know exactly where it is, and depending on how we're tilted, that center of gravity is going to change. So when the tripod's level, it balances. And that's because of a quick release plate on top. I'm going to just pull this out here. You can see I've got a sliding base here on top. So all tripods designed for live video production should have a quick release plate of some sort. So this goes into the head and it just slides in the back. And then once it's in, it's captured. So you're not going to lose the load, but you could lose the load, not because the head, it falls out of the head, but because the center of gravity is so off. So when we're balancing a camera, what we want to do is first, just kind of line it up. Make sure that it's not going to fall on you. And once you get that close, just lock it in. This is how counterbalance works. The idea is, once a camera gets more and more off axis, it wants to dive more and more. So the camera operator actually has kind of two jobs. One job is to point and tilt the camera where it needs to be. The other is to hold it steadily if it's tilted up or down. So if I let go, the camera dives on me, and I'm fighting my equipment to get the shot. If I'm a little bit off and I'm trying to follow someone, the angle of the camera can go up or down, or it can start getting shaky because I need to exert a force just to hold it steady. That's where counterbalance is a really beautiful thing. Counterbalance takes that idea and says, I'm going to push up on the front of the tripod to give you, whoop, there it goes. Counterbalance is designed that I can let go. I can let go of the tripod, and it's going to stay where it needs to go. So inside of the head, there's a little piston on this one that actually holds the tripod in place. So let me show you how to set that up. This one has, on this tripod, you just pull out this piston and you can add incremental counterbalance, which is great. Very adjustable, kind of infinitely adjustable. This tripod has a kind of a three-stage setup over here, so kind of a low, medium, and high. So I'm going to put it all the way on low, and we'll show what it looks like. Again, the camera is pretty much balanced, but it's a big, heavy load. And as soon as I let go, it really wants to dive. And it'll go backwards too. So it's not that it's not balanced over the top. It just needs some assistance staying where it is. So if it's neutral and it's falling on me, I might want to take the whole rig and just move it back just a little bit. So I'm going to do that. So this whole bottom plate moves. And just try to get it as central as possible. So I'll lock that down. Next, I'm going to turn up the counterbalance. And again, there's no friction holding this up. This is a fluid-based head. I have the tilt lock. The tilt lock can hold it in place, but tilt lock is off. And if I add a bunch of friction if I add a bunch of resistance through the fluid drag, it's going to hold it. It's going to not be totally off, but I don't want to fight the system. I really want to be able to have the camera stay in place regardless of where I leave the camera and regardless of how much fluid drag resistance I'm using. Fluid drag resistance really comes down to operator preference, and so we don't want to have to turn this all the way up just to kind of hold the shot. So I'm going to turn this down so you can really see it working, and we see that it's moving off axis here. And instead, I'm going to turn up the counterbalance now. So I'm going to go all the way up top, kind of go back and forth to make that engage. And now, it's holding the shot. It is a massive difference in what is possible. So how do you go from here? How do you just turn a knob and you're done? Not quite yet. What needs to happen is the camera needs to ideally zoom in tight on where you want to go and then let go and see if it tilts up or down. If you're looking at your target on the distance and it rises or falls, you can adjust the payload back and forth so the counterbalance isn't fighting you in that position. If you do a real extreme deflection, this camera is well balanced. It still holds it, but if you get too far off, it might still fall a little bit. The idea of counterbalance is that it's going to really help you in the mid-range of your shot. And if you go for a super extreme angle, you may still have to exert a little more force on the end, but that's how counterbalance works. So in review, tripods are incredibly useful for your production. They support the camera, they allow you to make really smooth shots, and it's important to have them properly balanced and counterbalanced to get the best results.